Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Talk with Tylin. So, with the craze of Avatar 2 finally being released in theaters, I decided to take it upon myself and rewatch the first movie on Disney Plus. Because if you guys didn't know, there's been this discussion going around about how people are talking about how Avatar is it's just basic. It's not memorable, it's just there. It's highly overrated. And I myself used to think this, but then I was being a little bit biased. Because I haven't seen Avatar since it came out, and when it came out, I was 7 years old. So of course I'm not going to remember anything. So now that I have a mature brain and can remember stuff from this movie, I decided to rewatch it again. So today's episode, which again is episode 8, I'm going to be giving my review on the first Avatar movie. So I just want to start off by talking about the things that I liked about this movie. One of those things being the soundtrack. The soundtrack to the first Avatar movie is surprisingly good. I might even call it underrated, it's not talked about enough. But there are definitely some bangers in here like I See You, Jake's First Flight, and the Pure Spirits of the Forest. Another thing I enjoyed about this movie was Zoe Saldana's character. I can't pronounce her name, so for the rest of this video, we're just gonna call her Zoe Saldana. She's actually very likable, and she's one of the few characters that I can say had a good character arc. We're gonna get into that later though. I also like the main villain of this movie. He just might be the best character in the whole film just because of how ridiculously evil he is. And I also enjoyed the final fight between him and Jake Sully. Though he did take off the only part of the mech suit that was protecting him. But you know, that's kind of a cool detail to his character. He thought he was untouchable. Also, the mech suits are super cool as well. They feel creative and inspired. You can definitely tell that James Cameron took some time to figure out how they could work. Speaking of that, the whole world of Pandora is amazing, especially the Na'vi people and their culture. If there's one thing this movie does, it gets you interested in how the Na'vi people work and how they do their thing. There's a point in this movie where you see everything they built get destroyed because the culture is just so beautiful and creative. It's sacred. You don't want to see it get destroyed. Also, the final battle was super good too. It's probably one of my favorites now. I mean, the score is exciting, there's action, it's fast paced. Also, another thing I liked was Zoe Saldana's performance. She basically carried this movie, so kudos to her. And I also like the scene where Jake gets separated from his group and has to survive a night in Pandora. Though it is really short, but it's still pretty cool. Okay, and those were the things that I liked about the movie. Now I'm going to go into the things that I don't like. So now this is a warning to everyone out there that doesn't like criticism. A lot of people treat Avatar as if it's this movie of peak fiction, as if the movie is peak, that it's the staple. Every other movie has to reach that. So when I watched this movie, I went in with that mindset. I went in thinking that this was going to be the next. So that's the mindset that I had when I was watching this movie. I went in thinking that it was going to be one of the best movies of all time. And if a movie is that good, it shouldn't have that many flaws about it, right? Wrong. So if you don't want to see your favorite movie basically get torn to shreds, this is where you should stop watching because I'm not holding anything back. So let's start off the negative part of this review with Jake Sully. This is by far one of the most worst protagonists in any movie. He's completely basic, he has no flaws. He's essentially just a creative character. He's just a basic and boring protagonist. He was basically Cole Young from the latest Mortal Kombat movie. I can't name a single flaw from this guy besides the fact that he's a moron. There's a point where he falls in love with the cat lady played by Zoe Saldana. The whole romantic storyline is told in montages, is completely rushed, and by the time that scene shows up, you're just thinking to yourself, wow, this is weird. Yes, I'm talking about the cat love scene. This chemistry is about as stale as two pieces of bread. This whole scene is weird. But if their relationship were more fleshed out and explored, I probably would have ignored how weird it was. Probably would have been like, yeah, you go, Jake. But nope, it's weird. And that's only because, again, their relationship is stale and I'm not immersed. Honestly, there's no chemistry between anyone throughout this whole movie. It literally just feels like they listed a bunch of actors, gave them a certain character, and told them to act. And before you start, I know what you're gonna say. That's basically how casting works. Yeah, duh, but I'm not supposed to know that. Movies are supposed to give you this illusion that the actors are those characters. You're not supposed to think about the actor, you're supposed to think about the character itself. If the chemistry in the movie is so good, you'll be thrown under an illusion that you're like, wow, that he's that character or she's that character. Here, no, not at all. They're just, it's stale. Again, it's just everything about this movie is stale. Like, I want to talk about Grace and Jake's relationship throughout this movie. There's a point in this movie where Grace dies. And when she does die, I don't care. I don't feel anything. I don't feel sad. And that's because Grace herself isn't a good character. She's literally just there. For starters, she starts off extremely snooty towards Jake. So we're obviously about to get this storyline where one person doesn't like the other but soon learns to like them and then yada yada yada. But here it's done, but done terribly. It's extremely rushed. Honestly, this whole movie's extremely rushed. Actually, I'm about to explain the pacing of this movie. Imagine yourself playing a video game, but only watching the cutscenes. You don't get any gameplay, it's just the cutscene. It's almost like a sandwich, but take everything out that makes the sandwich and just keep two pieces of bread together. I think this is the second time I've compared Avatar to a piece of bread. Like, there's no scene throughout this movie where these two actually sit down and talk to each other. Any piece of dialogue these two have together is either exposition or it's just quick and snappy. Like, I kid you not, I don't know if I missed something, but there's just a point where Grace just starts liking Jake. Like, it's told in montages, and it's never established how they rekindle a relationship with each other. It's literally after the part Jake gets lost and she's looking for him. You know what I think would have made this dynamic better? Jake should have been a disabled veteran who doesn't care about Na'vi religion or the science behind Pandora, none of that. He should have honestly looked up to the bad guy of this film. Been like a kiss up in a way. Not only would this explain why Grace doesn't like him, because again, it's not explained at all, but this would also give her the opportunity to show Jake the science behind Pandora and how beautiful it is. Boom, there goes your dynamic. I mean, we already know there's a photo of her hanging out with the Na'vi people, so it's pretty obvious that she cherishes Pandora. So why not capitalize on this and show us how infatuated she is with everything? Because again, it's just told. Also, this would have fleshed Jake's character out a lot more. I know it'd be basic and predictable storytelling, but it's at least better than what we got with this movie. Also, it would have given the final fight more stakes because he's fighting somebody that he used to look up to. And I know what you're about to say. Tylin, he did look up to the Colonel. How do you know that? How do you know that? Because again, the chemistry is so stale. Everything about this movie is so stale, from the line deliveries to the way these people act. You wouldn't be able to tell that. But anyways, I think this would have made Grace's death 10 times better and more emotional. Because after being so infatuated with the world and people and treating them so nice, she finally gets to be with the Na'vi god. I forgot the name. Awa. Stale characters, this guy's probably one of the worst in the movie too. He literally has no other trait besides I hate Jake. Okay, but why do you hate Jake? Sure, he's a human, you probably don't like humans, but you've seen him redeem himself and earn your mother's trust and your... I don't think him and Zoe were related. Were they? I don't care. It would have been great if we got a scene where these two sit down with each other and Jake asks him why. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are we beefing? Because honestly, he only sides with Jake after Jake beats him up. Also, there is no downtime with these characters. The only two characters that get a fleshed out relationship is Zoe Saldana's character and Jake Sully. Like, there is a point where our heroes lose and they're in a cage, but it immediately jumps to them escaping. There's no scene where they sit down and talk to each other like, ah, man, we messed up. Oh, we can't get it. At least have a scene where these guys are humanized. They're props. There we go. That's the word I was looking for, props. Each and every single character in this movie, besides Zoe Saldana's character, is a prop. And maybe the Colonel. I mean, the Colonel is just so ridiculously evil. I feel like everything just goes out the window. I think he's just a joke character. But again, I've heard people say it, they don't make villains like him anymore, where he's just... I'll let that slide, honestly. He doesn't need an arc. I don't need to relate to him at all. He's just a bad guy. He just likes being evil. I'm fine with that. Like speaking of the escape scene, there's even a point in this was probably one of my favorite scenes. There is a point where he sees them escaping and he walks out onto Pandora without the mask because the humans need the mask to breathe. He walks out and just starts shooting. Like he's bloodlusty. He wants to kill. Then one of the guys comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, you forgot your mask." He's like, "Oh yeah." Like that was cool. And like, speaking of downtime, there's a point where Jake calls this dude his brother. He's like, "Don't worry, brother, we'll get him," or "You got this, brother." Just stuff like that. But again, I don't feel emotionally invested enough to be like, "Oh wow, he called him brother. These two are like, they're tight." Again, because there's no scene that humanizes these characters. Also, the pilot character is definitely the worst one in the movie. I know I've said that most characters are the worst characters in the movie, but no, she's by far the worst. They don't give her a single trait besides the fact that I fly planes. That's it. So again, back to the scene where they're destroying the Na'vi people, like where they live and stuff. There's a part where she's like, "I'm not doing this," and then she just flies off, right? And I'm assuming this is supposed to be a scene where you're like, "Yeah, you go, girl," but I'm not invested enough in her character. I don't care. The movie doesn't give me a reason to care. Again, she's nothing but a prop for this movie. And there's a point where she dies, and again, I don't feel anything. I don't care. Every single death in this movie, besides one, just doesn't feel sad at all. There's a point where she dies, and again, I don't care. Like, every single death in this movie, besides one, just isn't sad. And that one death I'm talking about, by the way, that's slightly sad is this guy's death. I forgot his name. And that's literally because of Zoe Saldana's performance. Honestly, that whole scene is just sad. But it's not because the characters are losing, it's because the culture and everything that the Na'vi people have built up, again, is getting destroyed. Okay, so I'm looking through my notes and I think I've gotten through all the stuff that I didn't like. So now, it's time to give my final thoughts on Avatar. Personally, I feel as if we're giving James Cameron entirely way too much credit for this movie. This movie isn't good, it just looks good. Like, it feels inspired because of how creative the world is, but yet it feels uninspired because the story just sucks. And there are some scenes that I like in this movie, like where Jake has to tether his cattail to the big dragon thingy. That was pretty entertaining, very exciting. And again, I really did like the final battle. But again, the characters are bland, the pacing is rushed. It feels as if James Cameron went into like a pitch room, like to pitch his idea. And he was like, "Hey, we're gonna have this movie. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna have blue people. It's gonna have culture, aliens, mech suits." And the people were like, "Cool, but where's the story?" And then James is just like, "Oh, God, I forgot. We have to do that." That's literally what it feels like. It feels like he had all of this fleshed out, but then forgot to write a story for it. And you can honestly tell with this story that he was just jotting some stuff down. Because there is a point in this movie where they're looking for this resource called unobtainium. But if you call it unobtainium and you already have it, because there's a point where they show it, it's in the guy's hand, why are you calling it unobtainium if it's already been obtained? But overall, I mean, it's a decent watch. It's something fun to put on at a family gathering or when you're with your friends. And again, the Na'vi culture and the visuals and the soundtrack are amazing. Those are my 3 favorite parts about this whole movie. It is highly inspired and creative when it comes to this world and the people in it. The blue people, the humans are terrible. And I can honestly see how this movie deserves a sequel. I mean, again, the world is huge. I can definitely see how this can be a 5-part saga like James Cameron wanted to do, and how you can keep telling Jake Sully's story, because I think in the second one he has like kids now or something like that. Again, this franchise does have potential. James Cameron just needs to capitalize on the storytelling and not just the visuals. Like, you can't have a good movie without the story. I'll eventually check out the sequel once it's on streaming services, because I'm not finna sit in a theater for 3 hours straight and watch this. I'm interested in where the story goes, but not that interested. And my final thoughts about this movie, I mean, it's good. It's not amazing. It's not jaw-dropping. It's definitely not peak. It's just good. And I honestly enjoyed the watch. I mean, it's entertaining. I mean, all movies should be entertaining. It's not at all boring like people say. The pacing may be fast, but it kept me engaged with the story. And there's honestly no scenes that drag out. And I mean, that's cool for a fun, stupid movie that knows it's being stupid. But James Cameron holds these movies to such a high standard, even though it's not a high standard movie. Like, bro, this movie's no better than Black Adam. And Black Adam knows it's a stupid movie. I mean, they literally have a scene where Black Adam comes out to the song Paint It Black. Like, how much dumber can you get? Honestly, this is just the result of James Cameron having an ego and just being completely full of himself. And honestly, I would too if I had two of the highest grossing movies ever. But yeah, this movie's average. Dare I say mid. The inspiration is definitely there. It just needs that extra kick to make it a classic. But there you have it. There are my thoughts on the first Avatar movie. Let me know what you guys think about this movie. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or have you ever seen it before? I can definitely see why people say this movie isn't memorable. I mean, the characters are just so stale and bland and boring. Even when I was little and after watching that movie, the only character that stuck with me was the one being played by Zoe Saldana. I can definitely see why nobody remembers this movie. I haven't seen the sequel, but hopefully it capitalizes on what this movie missed out on, which is just a good story. But again, let me know what you thought about the movie. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys later.